All right, great. Well, thank you everybody for joining me for our first live discussion. I know in entirely online classes, sometimes that can be a little bit annoying. Like, why do I have to show up for something? But at the same time, kind of like James said, it gets us talking and seeing that there's real people in the class and having a conversation rather than that really, I can't not say I hate it. Let me make a 200-word comment, and then you make a 300-word comment, and then as the instructor, I have to read them all. Yeah, no, I'm not doing that. So today, our first topic is kind of easy and beginner, so don't feel like you have to have, cited things or anything, but we're just starting off with, working with health coaches and working in health coaching, especially one-on-one with clients. We really have to have an understanding of what it is we're working towards, right? And so that starts with a basic understanding of how we might think about or how we might holistically understand what we mean by health, which is why I put it in quotes in the title. So what do y'all think? And you're really talking to each other, so I can just sit here and
Could I say something?
please, yeah.
I think health is very much misunderstood in our modern times. I think when we think of health, we think of pharmaceutical drugs and like reactive measures. When I think we should be thinking more of preventive measures and like really focusing on our diet and what type of water we ingest, the types of food we ingest, exercise, things like that. And it, especially what we all went through, despite our opinion on 2020, it seems like none of that was even talked about. It was all about, drugs that could help if you already had the symptoms and things like that. But I've never heard any media talk about preventative measures. And so that's my beginning input, I guess.
Well, yeah, if we're being honest, and I'm going to be critical because as a professional in the field, I think the voice of health education was absent throughout the entire pandemic. But I want to say it's not because I didn't try, James. Even on my campus, I begged to get into rooms to help with how do we communicate with the students about these things, or how do we make sure that we're talking about these things with folks in the right way. So 100%. I've even changed my language. I don't call it health care anymore. I call it my medical care. Right? Because it's certainly not paying for me to go to a gym or, it pays for some of my wellness stuff, but not really. Most of it is, as you said, there's some preventative screening, but for more significant and serious physical health issues, and not so much all of those other things that help support us. So,
right.
Yeah.
Like one of the real big things too is I started doing a lot of research at the beginning of 2020, research I've never done before against germ theory and terrain theory and things like that. But one of the biggest things that I found was having to do with cancer and preventing cancer. And most of the research I found, one of the main conclusions was that if you're ingesting alkaline foods and your body stays alkaline, cancer cannot form, and cancer can only form in a cancerous environment. And it's like little things like that it just blows my mind that it's not common knowledge,
Sure. I mean, I wish epidemiology was common knowledge, right? Because then I could have avoided a lot of really annoying conversations over this last year and a half. But yeah, thanks. Well, I'm always trying to look for the bright side or the silver lining of this pandemic. And so there's one for you, that it inspired some more active research and maybe ignited some passions in some of the quieter spaces in the field. So great. Yeah. What about everyone else? What do you think about when we're thinking about health holistically? Or Evan?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. So more or less like an anatomy standpoint, like that homeostasis, that equilibrium, that everything has a balance. And if you're, I mean, it's impossible to be right in the middle of like perfect balance of like health, but like, but there's different branches of health, as in, you have your like fitness health, you have mental health, emotional, like you have all these health issues,
Hmm.
and there's all these like different stressors internally and externally that like come at that, and like trying to be somewhere in the middle of that as best as you can would be like my intake of that.
Right? I mean, there's one of the weaknesses of the World Health Organization definition, in my opinion, right? A state of complete. It's like a state of complete what? Like, I'm never going to be anything except someday I'll be completely dead, right? But I'm never like completely rested, completely done with my to-do list, or completely healthy on any of those levels. And there's where that Carter Wilson definition, where they're talking about that dynamic status. So there again, where you're bringing in elements of physics, right? Homeostasis, and even that actions have equal and opposite reactions, right? Kind of bringing all those sciences together to have this understanding that I might be having a great physical health day, but then my mental health gets tweaked or my financial health takes a hit, right? And then that can just sort of blow everything. Um,
Right. And then like also like my input of like perfect health might be completely different than anyone else's in this meeting. Like
sure.
whatever, because whatever I could enjoy and like and could bring me happiness, which contributes to that health aspect, could be
Right.
different than anyone else. Given that like the things I'm talking about are like good for you, for the most part. But
Yeah, but also not super concrete, right? So,
yeah,
and sometimes people will use the language of like black and white versus gray, but it's like when we have an idea of, well, if you do all of these things, then you're going to be healthy, and healthy is going to give you a better quality of life and perhaps a longer life expectation. And yeah, it's going to increase the likelihood of that, right? But we all know plenty of people who are like health train wrecks that will live to be 90 something, and then people who are perfect, air quotes again, lots of air quotes today, right? Pictures of health. I can think of, my husband's grandmother. She chewed tobacco. She was morbidly obese. She died at 98 years old, right? And when I was in grad school, one of my office mates, her best friend was a vegan, marathon runner, professional body lift person, died of an aneurysm at like 28 years old. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. Like great grandma actually did all the wrong things and lived to 98 and never really had any problems. Megan did all the right things and died of 28. And so, right. So that's again part of in health education where we struggle with like young students, right? Saying you need to do all these things to live healthy lives. And it's like, yeah, or not.
right,
But
yeah.
definitely the odds are in our favor, right?
And then you have like that foundation of like health, and then like say someone, yeah, they eat all the right foods, they work out, but like mentally they're not like okay, like that contributes to like the overall scale. And
100%, right? Or kind of
everyone's
like
different.
like James was saying earlier too, or they even have this understanding of what the right food is, right? Because we have to also think of like the corporations that are providing agriculture and food, for example, in the lies they tell us about those things. So, Kirsten, what do you think? Oh, you're still muted.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Going from both of what they said, knowing like overall, like there's more than just one definition of health. So when you think of health, you think of physical, but when I counsel people or see patients, there's a lot of background information. So not just what they look like, because I can see someone what they look like and they look healthy, but then once they start talking, there's a lot of background information that kind of shows that they're not okay. And
Right.
that I had to consult psych because of what they're saying doesn't really make any sense, or I think there's like a mental health problem.
Mm-hmm.
And also with the preventative side, nutrition kind of is part of the preventative side. And when I have counsel people, they kind of, what I think is like common sense, they don't really realize like what is a vegetable, what is apple,
Right.
like understand like
Yeah.
the common like stuff. So there is a lot of like both preventative and not preventative and understanding like the overall like what health is and understanding like our clients.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I know I'm obviously the oldest one in the room, so maybe the only one that remembers we've had two presidents that have said things like ketchup is a vegetable, right? And then not only said ketchup is a vegetable, but said it in the context of a school lunch program where we would count it as a vegetable serving for kids who were probably eating it with French fries. So now they've got two vegetable servings, neither one of which, I mean, they eat, right? But if that's their 2 vegetables for the day. Because then when we look at those certain environments and it's like, yes, I'm getting 3 servings of vegetables a day, but one's ketchup and one's, French fries. I don't know what the third might be. Maybe a fruit, right? Let's make it fruits and vegetables. And then it's like, ugh, okay. Yeah, but all right. I'm sorry. I'm trying to, it's Megan that's on the phone, right? So you can't raise your hand or anything. I want to tap you in if you want to.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I can't see everyone's names.
That's
or
okay.
anything. But I would say I kind of feel the same way as everyone else. Like, they brought up really great points. I feel like health is, I guess, like what you make it. So, like, for example, someone's definition of like healthy eating might be, oh, I only can eat like organic fruits and vegetables. Where like me, on the other hand, an apple is an apple, whether it's organic or not. I'll just rinse it and eat it. And then like another person might feel like, oh, well, maybe to get my fruit in the day, I'll eat applesauce. So I guess it just depends on each person and their views, and I guess whatever makes them feel healthy.
Sure, right. And I think that's a great attitude to have about, I'm going to frame it almost as like an acceptance of diverse ways of accepting the different pieces, right? So like you said, an organic apple or an apple or applesauce is, again, still probably better than a 1/4 cup of ketchup, right? Which I don't know who would eat a 1/4 cup of ketchup, but let's make it 2 tablespoons. And then, back to that capitalism piece, organic doesn't always mean what people think it means, right? Sometimes organic means fertilized by waste, which sometimes can include human waste, which is like not really an apple I want. And even if I wash it, maybe, I don't know. But then thinking about, right, and someone might say, well, the applesauce is, partially, it's not going to have as much fiber perhaps, but it's like, okay, but they're still eating a version of an apple, right? And there are still worse things that they could be choosing. So I think it was in our health and wellness update yesterday from the university, they said something like doing something poorly is better than not doing it at all. and so even thinking about that, I appreciate when someone's even starting by thinking about what they're eating, especially when we get to all the health theory, right? We think about like trans theoretical model. If someone is at least thinking about what they're eating, it's going to be easier to help them than people that are just eating unconsciously, right? And then if there are minor tweaks that people need, so say somebody gets a diagnosis of diabetes, for example, then we're going to have to reconsider how they view fruits and vegetables or what they view their nutrition intake to be. But yeah, everybody's starting from a different place. Alexandra, thanks.
Hi, I just wanted to chime in. I
Please.
thought like health is very broad, and I did a lot of research about how the gut and brain can be like interrelated and stuff, and everybody's different, and finding the right diet for them, and how like them eating badly can affect their mental health, and how their mental health can lead them to eating poor. How physical health and gut health and like brain health are all related, but it depends on the person and their genetics too. If like they're gonna live a long time, maybe not. I don't know. It's just weird how broad it is. Like just for one word, it's very, very broad.
My connection's having a little bit of a struggle. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Yeah, that gut-brain connection is a great example, especially now that we know what we know about autism specifically. Further, when we think, oh, Alexandra, you're muted. I see you. Oh.
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Okay. It looked like you were talking, so I was like, oh gosh, I shouldn't be talking when she's talking. So like autism is a great example, right? And I think another thing that we don't do well with educating people about is how our different anatomical and physiological body systems work together, right? So people believe, for example, that going to the dentist is more about aesthetics and whether we have white teeth that are straight. And it's like, no, a cavity can go straight to your heart and kill you pretty quickly. And like you're saying, if you have a gluten intolerance or you have a sensitivity and you're eating something, that gut connection, and especially the leaky gut that we see among a lot of folks across the autism spectrum disorder spectrum, have, again, those specific connections. We lost her. Maybe she'll come back. All right. Nico, what do you think? I'll let her back in.
My definition of health would just be along the lines of, I forgot who said it, I think it was Evan, just a balance of everything, spiritual, mental, physical, just making sure that everything's in tune, and just having a good balance, because other things can affect, your mental health can affect your physical well-being, just as much as an injury would, or something like that can, so I just think health is a balance of all the aspects together holistically, if we're talking holistic.
Great. So I think Kirsten gave a good example, but maybe we can expound upon it or expand it. How might be some ways that when we're working with individuals or trying to help clients? So Kirsten was referencing, like, when I'm doing intake, I notice like, there's maybe a mental health thing here that's not being spoken about. So given that you all seem to be in agreement about this holistic understanding and all the systems having what I would refer to as reciprocal determinism, right? That each thing affects the other and can sort of move or blow, is what I said, moves it over there, brings it back, whatever. How might we utilize that when working with clients, that understanding? So we could think about ways in which we would try to explain to people so they would have an understanding, or maybe some of the cues that Kirsten was noticing, even in the person's answering the questions. Are there things we could watch for? Or are there things you see out in the world where they are isolating an element of health to the exclusion of others in a way that wouldn't be beneficial? These are my questions in the morning without caffeine. Yeah, James.
What if maybe the best way to help them understand is find good examples that they can relate to, like maybe if it's about a mental health problem, give an example of how a poor diet can affect mental health by having lack of nutrition, and I guess maybe being depleted of serotonin and other chemicals that we can get in having a good diet. Maybe something like that. Just find examples that any common person can really visualize to help them understand the importance of it, maybe.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good idea. And I always say the poor diet is in and of itself, right? But if I'm hungry or hangry, we might say, right, then I might also be a more irritable driver, right? I'm going to maybe make not so great choices later on that day when I'm consuming alcohol beverages, right? I mean, it could be this reverberation, or maybe my anger propels me to like go work out in some aggressive way in the gym to release that energy, which might actually increase my physical fitness, right? And so definitely we can see that equal opposite, or, that reactive connection. I think COVID's a good example of that, right? I mean, immediately we were focused on this virus and where it's going, and so it's like lock up, right? And then we gave science enough time to like figure out what was going on, and now we're focusing on vaccines. But at the same time, we're like quietly starting to talk about the financial problems that people struggled with when they weren't able to work and maybe didn't qualify for support. We were all joking about the weight we put on and the poor eating habits that we were doing during COVID, the mental health crisis that's really, we've been experiencing that on campus in a way we've never seen before. We've always had, need for more mental health issues, but this semester has already been really rough on the students that have moved back on campus, especially. And it's like some of that is, for 2 years now, they've been locked in their house, and now they're expected to like be out in the air quote normal world again, right, and figure it out. And it's a little stress inducing to say the least. And then thinking about the kind of silly things, like I remember early on, they said that in the state of Ohio, the number of people being pulled over on the highways for going at least 100 miles per hour had exponentially increased during the pandemic. And like, I still don't understand why that is, but it's like, so now we've got a significant traffic safety issue as a result of COVID. And now that most of our local hospitals are filled up, now we have people dying because there's no room for them in the hospital because of COVID. So they're dying of things that they might not have normally died from if there was a hospital bed and, you know, not exhausted medical care waiting to help them. So yeah, that's an example I'd like to let go of, right? But I don't know. Even today, I came into work because I was like, I can't take the September 11th stuff. I'm like crying my face off and thinking even about, you know, what that meant and the ways in which that changed my personal life and professional life. And again, the way we think about life and health and things of that nature. So any other thoughts on how we might define health? I think based on everything that you've all said, yeah, Evan, thanks.
No, I was just gonna go saying back to that last question you had about people. I was just gonna say that like each person's, like I said earlier, is like different. So like, how would you find out if someone is something? I would just say, you know, talk to them, have a good conversation with them. Like if it's like your client patient, get to know them. You're kind of gonna figure out what their strong suits are, what their weak suits are, where you can kind of find that balance of where they might struggle, where they might exceed. To kind of like, if it's like a ladder, kind of like trying to balance that back out.
Sure, and maybe highlighting for them connections that they might not be aware of, right? Again, referencing what James said earlier about there, because I appreciate the desire for it, James, but I really don't believe in common sense anymore. Like, I just don't think it's there, right? And so here again, if someone's tired, they want to start with like, I haven't slept, but it might also be because they're not eating well, or they're actually over caffeinated and then they're crashing, or they're not practicing their spiritual health. So they're carrying around all this baggage, right? Because they're not meditating or praying or however they would, you know, exercise that. And so they might see it as this one thing. And I see this a lot with my friends with children, and I don't mean that to be critical, but they'll just say, well, I've got these kids and I can't work out because I have kids. And it's like, well, why don't you play with them in ways that help you, right? Or work through their nutrition. And it's always easy to instruct parenting when you've never done it yourself. But again, just with clients, trying to get them to make connections and help them find easier pathways to the things that they're wanting, then they might see, because sometimes that cognitive dissonance, that is a blocker where they just don't see the connection. And sometimes it is as simple as just highlighting the connection for them and doesn't involve all the extra stuff that we're going to start working on, which is how do we help with their attitudes and their behavioral choices and the actual habit and routine of these things. Nico.
I just want to go off of something you said, how you said that you don't think that common sense is very common anymore. And I think that also may be something that you can highlight as a counselor, because a lot of people, you know, they don't know about nutrition, or they weren't taught sleep habits, or, you know, whatever, you know, sometimes you're a product of your environment. So some people just don't know things, and you have to listen to them, like Evan was saying, and make sure that anything that they're saying, you can highlight, like if they're not eating the proper foods, or, you know, if they, you know, I was partying all night last night and I don't know why I'm tired. Well, you know, kind of, that might have something to do with it, you know. So just like you said, just some
educating.
People don't have common sense.
Yeah, not assuming that people know the stuff that should feel obvious or does feel obvious to us, right? One of my colleagues the other day was making a joke, and she posted a picture of her workspace, and she said, apparently I might be taking this hydration thing too seriously. And she had a water bottle, she had a caffeinated, carbonated beverage, she had a pure juice and something else, I don't remember. And I was like, well, but drinking that one invalidates those ones. And then you have to replace that with this, you know? And I was like, oh my gosh, never mind. Shut up, Lori. She's not asking you to like lecture to her. So yeah, that lack of real scientific basis and understanding of how we get to health. And for me, the best example, maybe it's because I'm on a college campus or female, is when people are talking, because again, everyone now is like, oh, I put on this extra COVID weight, now I have to. And it's like the first thing that especially, I'm going to say, especially women are taught or trained to do is to start starving yourself and like ramp up the cardio, right? Which is like exactly not how you do it. And so starting to think about like nutrition actually being more important than exercise and activity, which my boss is an exercise scientist. She doesn't like when I say that, but it's just scientifically true. You can't work out a bad diet because like no matter how many bench presses you can do, it's not going to bring macro and micronutrients into your body, right? And so again, thinking about that. And so some of those things I hope you'll find in your professional path, as well as they'll come up in here, where some of those things can actually be transformational for people when they make those connections, right? So when that person learns like, no, actually ramp down the cardio and let's fix your nutrition in these kinds of ways. It's not about eliminating everything. It's about adding all of these things. So there's less room for that other stuff that's more junky or garbage. I'm excited. There's one commercial, granted it's for mattresses, which really isn't the point, but they're talking about junk sleep. And I'm like, oh, that's great language around sleep hygiene, because it's definitely something with all of the electronics and the blue lights, you know, that among a college population particularly, sleep becomes something that is often really under-respected with regard to how powerful it can be in each of these other spheres. So. All right, well, that's our time. I think the most important thing to keep in mind when we're working with people is that there really isn't one definition of health. And while we can all have personal and professional opinions about if something's healthier or less healthy than something else, that we have to keep all of those things in mind. So even, and I apologize, it's easier for me, Megan, I'm sorry, when your names are right there. So like Megan said, you know, that however each person is coming to that space is where we start with them, and that not being that one perfect or ideal way of doing any of this being what's most important. And so meeting a client where they are, and then maybe helping just tweak, you know, some of the skills that they might be lacking, or some of the education they might be missing, some of those connections that they might be overlooking. And then even just then some of that like cheerleading, you know, that social and emotional support for them to try something or to try to view it a different way, I think can be really helpful. So, all right, so let me go ahead and stop this recording.